Hello, I'm your City Manager, Neil Morgan. Today I want to briefly describe to you the recommended operating budget, which I have presented to City Council for the fiscal year that begins July 1st, 2011 and ends June 30th, 2012. This is the actual written document that will be reviewed by the City Council over the next few weeks, and as a result of public hearings, suggestions and emails from citizens and analysis by the City Council, we will hopefully at our first City Council meeting in May vote on an operating budget to establish the expenditure plan for both the city and the school operations for next year. I want to talk to you about what's in this proposed budget and basically divide that into three parts. First, I want to describe on a broad level the expenditures and the revenues that comprise this budget. Then I want to talk in a little bit more detail about some of the things that we're spending money on in the upcoming year and some of the things that we've had to cut as a result. And then I want to briefly look to the future and talk about some of the things we have to think about as a community going into years beyond the next operating budget. Even though it's counting the school budget a very large number, something on the order of over $750 million, it's really not that difficult to understand the basic dynamics of the expenditures and the revenues that comprise your city budget. On the expenditure side, most of the money we spend is for services that involve people. And that includes both the money that we pass through to the schools as well as the money that stays with the city government and provides the services of city government. We are a very labor-intensive operation, and by the time you count salaries and benefits, that is what the vast majority of money is spent on. It's no different this year. The sources of revenue that comprise that budget are, by and large, local taxes, the single largest of which is the real estate tax, many other much smaller local taxes, transfers from the state, and other much more modest miscellaneous sources of revenue. For the year that begins in July, our two biggest sources of revenue, the real estate property tax and transfers from the Commonwealth of Virginia, unfortunately are both going to be down again. So this means that I've had to build a recommended budget with the two single largest sources of revenue trending in a downward fashion. On the other hand, on a more positive note, many of our smaller local revenues, such as the sales tax, the meals tax, the lodging tax, machinery and tool tax, business professional license tax, those are steady or appear to be trending slightly larger. So when you put all that together, we come up with an estimate for total revenue for next year. And that estimate, combining all revenue sources, will be a budget that is just ever so slightly larger than the one for the fiscal year that we're currently in. If you combine both the city and the school budget, it's something on the order of 0.25% larger than the year that we're in currently. So for all practical purposes, when we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, it's pretty much a flat budget. Now I want to try to be a little more specific and talk about what's different in the upcoming budget that we're recommending from the budget year we're in or perhaps in previous years. Because the national economic situation has stabilized, we're no longer in this free-fall crisis mode that I think many local governments have felt like they've been in. And we're trying to take advantage of that situation and prioritize a few places where we really need to put some additional resources. For the most part, for me, my recommendations are in the area of public safety. We are going to be able to restore a few of the positions that we've frozen in the police department. We're going to be able to bring some more firefighter paramedics online for our new fire station, and I'm going to authorize a couple of additional positions in our juvenile services office. There have had to be some counterbalancing cuts, not on the scale of the last couple years, but we do have a small number of reductions in force and a small number of positions that are eliminated in order to make the arithmetic of the budget add up. In particular, I've made the difficult decision to recommend that we eliminate the library's bookmobile service. By eliminating this service, we save approximately $120,000 a year. We'll avoid replacing a very expensive vehicle which is nearing the end of its useful life. And I want to be clear, this is my recommendation, not the library director's. I simply believe that it's a service that's nice to have, but not absolutely critical, particularly in these days of high technology. Similarly, I have made the recommendation to close the farmers market on Jefferson Avenue at 26th Street. This project, while it involves an attractive building, has never really worked out as it was envisioned, and especially when you consider the major redevelopment strategy that we're working on Lower Jefferson. I just feel like it is the time to mothball that operation. That will save approximately $90,000 a year, and we will be able to make a determination in the future once our redevelopment plans are further along as to whether that site should be cleared for redevelopment or perhaps reopened as a farmer's market in the context of other development at some point in the future. Additionally, in the area of solid waste, I am recommending that we go to every other week bulk collection. Now, many cities in America have long ago gone to this type of procedure. While that may cause some inconvenience, and I'm sure some will be concerned about the cleanliness of the city as a result of this, most of the information that I have suggests that once people get used to that, you put out your bulk waste the same week that you put out your recycling every other week, and most people will be able to get used to that. And what that will allow us to do is eliminate some positions that are vacant, not replace some very expensive knuckle boom trucks, and also carve out some capacity for our community maintenance effort where we can do neighborhood cleanups, targeted weekend projects, and not have these large knuckle boom trucks driving around the city looking for loose bulk collection every week, but instead every other week. So I think that's an efficiency, I think it's commonsensical, and that will allow us to take some substantial pressure off the solid waste fund. In addition to some of the specific cuts that I've been forced to recommend in some of the particular areas of new spending that I've mentioned, there are some broader categories that are probably worth explaining to you as where we're having to put resources, and these are really the five. One, as has been discussed to great length, it is necessary that we continue to strengthen our pension fund. And so for the third year, I am increasing the city's contribution for its retiree employee pension fund. I will add this is in the context of pension reform, which we put through last year, although it will take a number of years for the long-term savings from that pension reform to be realized. So strengthening the pension system is one area where we've had to invest additional resources. Continuing our very good city coverage for employee health care is another area where we have had to put additional resources. As you know, employers all around America are struggling with the soaring cost of health care, and while we await the impact of national health care reform, we have found it necessary to put additional resources into this area. As you all know, energy prices are going up substantially, and many city operations involve the operation of vehicles, and we have had to budget for additional resources to keep our fleet of vehicles on the road and provide the services that you expect. Really, the two single most important broad expenditure thrusts in addition to the others I've mentioned. One is support for our schools. Newport News has always prided itself in investing in its public schools. Last year, as you may recall, I found it necessary to reduce school funding by $4 million in terms of our local contribution. The schools have sustained yet another cut from the Commonwealth of Virginia, and this year I am in a position to recommend a $3 million increase in our local contribution. I'm very pleased to do that so that the combined state and city funding for our school system begins to be stabilized. And finally, our city employees are a hardworking bunch, and they have gone for 3 years without a general salary increase. And when we built our budget this year, I asked the budget staff and all the department directors to look for cuts and savings that would allow us to have some modest salary increase for our very excellent city workforce. And I am pleased to report that I will be recommending a 2% general wage adjustment for the city workforce. And I feel like that is a very important initiative in this budget as we look to the future. Even though I'm pleased that in the area of real estate tax and personal property tax, the major taxes that the city collects, we've been able to hold the line yet again, particularly being respectful that all of our citizens are suffering as the economy only slowly emerges from the recession. I have found it necessary to recommend 2 fee increases and 1 tax increase. The tax increase is to the cigarette tax, in which I'm recommending that we go from 65 cents a pack to 75 cents a pack. As a matter of public health, if this discourages people from smoking, that's good. For those who choose to smoke, I would point out that Virginia, combining local and state taxes, is still one of the lowest tobacco tax states in the United States. And it was for that reason and the fact that the approximately $500,000 of revenue that the cigarette tax generates that I made the decision to make that recommendation. The solid waste fee, I'm recommending a very modest increase, which amounts to about $14 a year. This is so we avoid spending down our solid waste reserves, and we're in a healthy position to run our trash and recycling collection as a business going forward. And finally, as we have traditionally done in the area of waterworks, this regional utility, which is owned and operated by the City of Newport News, will have an incremental fee increases for most users. As you may have read, there are some structural changes in our rate proposals for waterworks this year that have to do with keeping up with the times and the fixed costs of providing the services of the water utility. But to the average customer, it will be a very small increase, as in most previous years. We try to handle the water utility like private utilities and not recommend large increases and then skip years, but rather have modest increases that are easier to tolerate on a year-to-year basis. So this $750 million plus budget in terms of local fees and taxes has the solid waste and the waterworks rate increase and the cigarette tax. All other fees and taxes for this year remain at the level that they have been established for the current year. And perhaps this is a good point to sort of move beyond the particulars of this budget and tell you just a little bit about what we're thinking about as we think of future years and how the city needs to respond to that. You know, our workforce is made up heavily of baby boomers. Many of us will be leaving the workforce in the next few years. It's one of the reasons it's very important to provide some opportunity for salary increases for the workforce. We have to retain and recruit good employees for the future, because this recession is coming to an end, and it won't be long before we're looking at a situation where we're struggling to recruit the kind of talented employees we're going to need to replace our very good but aging workforce. The City Council has adopted a series of strategic priorities. We call them the Strategic Eight, and you may have heard me speak of them previously. This budget begins to shape some of our expenditures in alignment with those priorities, and moving into the future, I will see the need to do more of that in areas such as community maintenance, in sustainability, in redevelopment, and you begin to see that in this year's budget. For example, the seed money for the new Stony Run Community Center is in this year's operating budget. Next year we'll need to find the funds to fully operate that facility. In the area of customer service, the City Council has made a commitment for us to begin moving forward with the 311 system. And we have the seed money for that system in my proposed budget, and in the FY 2012-2013 budget, we'll need to fully fund that new initiative. As we think about the economy, Newport News and Hampton Roads has benefited during the recession from being an area with lots of federal government spending. Our housing market hasn't crashed like some places. Our unemployment rate, while high, has certainly not been at the extreme levels of some other communities. As the country comes out of the recession, it's important to think about how Newport News and Hampton Roads are going to fare going forward. I have to share with you my concern that with the cutbacks that are being discussed at the federal level, it's reasonable to expect the Newport News and the Hampton Roads economy to not grow rapidly. We rely on federal spending at our federal laboratories, at military bases, and of course for shipbuilding. And one has to suspect that with downward pressure on federal spending, that our budgets in future years will still be under some stress, even as the economic cycle comes out of recession and we hopefully are in for a period of general growth. So the watchword for the future will continue to be caution, and I would just like to leave you with a few broad thoughts about our budget environment. Newport News is blessed with a very diverse economy and an administrative capacity to handle the difficulties that we've faced in recent years. We are in good shape financially. I'm able to recommend a budget that has only modest fee and tax increases, and for the most part holds the line on fees and taxes, and limits the amount of reductions in force and other positions to be eliminated. There's an emphasis on public safety, and there's an emphasis on moving forward with some of our strategic priorities of the future. A lot of work has gone into preparing this recommended budget. I want to thank the budget staff and the department directors of city government who have worked with me to get us to this point. I feel like it is balanced, responsible, consistent with our priorities, and realistic in terms of the limitations that we face as a community. Now it's time for the City Council and the citizens to review these recommendations, provide us your input so that we can come together and act on a budget in early May of this year. The City Council will be reviewing my recommendations in great detail over the coming days. You will have several opportunities to review and comment, most particularly at the April 12th and April 14th budget public hearings. April 12th will be in City Council chambers at City Hall at 7 o'clock, and on April 14th at 7 o'clock we will have a second budget public hearing at Mary Passage Middle School. The budget is posted on the city's webpage and is also available in hard copy at our 4 libraries. If you have comments or questions about the budget, call the budget staff at 926-8733 or look on the city's website at nnGov.com, in which there's a link where you can email our staff with your input or questions. Thank you very much for your attention to the city's operating budget for FY 2011-2012. This is a very important financial document that will guide the progress of this community going forward into the next fiscal year. I appreciate your attention.